And we're going back to the United Kingdom to Dan Newman. Dan, you are also living with complications. You want to talk about it. Usually it is you letting others talk because you run this great podcast, The Talking Diabetic, where people living with diabetes, you interview them. Now I get to, well, not interview you, but give you the stage so we hear your story. Dan, take it away. Thank you for joining Docday.
Thank you, Bastian, and thank you to Steffi and Hanne for inviting me as well. And the roles are reversed. I'll do my best, but my guests are usually much better at talking than I am. So I've been living with type 1 diabetes for 25 years, and I was diagnosed when I was 10 years old. And for me, the most difficult period was my teenage years going into my early 20s. And I am here talking at docday today. As you mentioned, Bastian, I live with complications. So I live with diabetic retinopathy, and my treatment to this day has included multiple laser surgeries, and I've had vitrectomy surgery in my right eye. I also was in 2013, was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, and in 2018, I received a kidney transplant. I was very fortunate to not have to need dialysis. But what I found in terms of the community is that complications, and we've touched on stigma, but it's still a topic that isn't spoken about much. And it almost feels like it's a bit of a dirty word. And when you are diagnosed with complications, my experience anyway, when it came to the retinopathy and the chronic kidney disease, was that I felt alone. I felt that I had failed the test. I don't know what test, but I just felt I'd failed the test. And everything that I was told all those years ago about if you don't look after yourself, this will happen, all came flooding back to me in those moments of hearing that news. And that was really difficult. And then when you go out into the community, you don't really see many people talking about complications. So then you can feel even more alone. And at this point, before I go on, I should give a shout out to, I'm sure you know, Chris, the Grumpy Pumper, because I see tweets from him saying, with the hashtag, let's talk about complications. And that encouraged me to start to talk more about my complications, because I realized if I felt alone, there must be others who felt like me, or felt alone at the point of being diagnosed with complications. And actually, when we talk about a subject, we can take some of that stigma away from it and actually normalize talking about it. When I say normalize, I don't mean just, oh yeah, don't worry, don't just live your life how you want to, don't worry about complicate, but actually just take away that stigma and we can have a conversation. Because one thing that does happen, and I'm kind of living testament, as Salil is as well, is that, and many others are, is that when you do receive that diagnosis, in most cases, life goes on and you still have to adjust to life, living with your diabetes and living with complications. And we all know how relentless living with diabetes is. And as I mentioned, that when I felt like I'd failed the test, and this had a real impact on my mental health and mental well-being. And the biggest challenge for me was being able to, and maybe others have faced this as well, is learning to forgive yourself for past mistakes and actually not getting caught up in the cycle of, if only I did this, if only I did that. Because it took a long time to get to this point of realizing I can't change the past and I have to accept it. And I know that's again something that Ken touched on when he spoke about acceptance, and acceptance does come in different shapes and forms. And that was probably one of the difficult journeys for me, particularly living with I'd say the chronic kidney disease, was just that journey to acceptance. But what also helped is that during that time, I realized that other people needed kidney transplants, and it wasn't everyone who needed a transplant was had diabetes. And whilst it might sound a bit silly, that was a bit of an eye opener for me. It's like, oh, there are other people, and that helped with my journey to acceptance. And now when I look at the treatment that I have, instead of trying to look at it as I'm trying to save my sight, I look at it now as I'm trying to improve my site. I'm improving where I am, and I've had to really work towards changing that mindset. And again, it does take time. And one thing that also I did want to touch on is just talking about the experiences of being a Black man living with type 1 diabetes and coming into the online community, and again finding it difficult to find. It was difficult for me to find people who looked like me, who had stories or journeys that were similar to me, who understood some cultural nuances. And I think as we all know, representation matters. And I feel that voices of marginalized groups need to be heard more. And I know that there are many organizations and companies working to improve that, and that's improved over the past year. But for me, and perhaps a call to action, is that I do believe more needs to be done to be heard from marginalized groups, because as we all know, diabetes does not discriminate, and we need to hear from everyone. And touching on what's been said before, it's about us all working together as a community. So yeah.
Yeah. Dan, thank you very much for being so open about all of this, and also to the others, Ken, Michael, Felissa in the beginning. If you look at some of the feedback we're currently getting on social media, I know that's only getting a glimpse of it, but all your stories seem to really resonate. I think if Twitter and Instagram could transmit tears, you could see some people crying. Some are even writing that right now. I even hear from the back office here that Steffi might be joining. I'm just gonna read some of the comments we're getting, but there's a lot more. Catherine is writing about blame being a big barrier to getting good care. Marianne, who is living with complications herself, is saying how much these talks have just resonated. Min is talking about that she is crying and that she is sick of being resilient. So Dan, you said complications aren't being talked about enough, especially on the mental health side. That is even more so the case, and that we need to change that. And I just want to pledge here from the dedoc side that this is what we are trying to do. We are hosting Doc Day to get these kind of voices, your voice, Ken's voice, Michael's voice, and a lot more in the future out there. Because one way to do that is to include these voices where people like you and many others can talk about some of the not so nice things of living with diabetes, but also transform it into a call to unity, a call to action, a call for help, but also for support, for peer support. And this is what we're trying to do here. And I think the most important thing is what you also said, is that we need to get this message across that none of us is here by him or herself. We are not alone with this. Many of us struggle, me included, with complications and with mental health issues relating to that, to living with diabetes. And it is a very important part of life with diabetes. And in order to get this accepted, this was the A in Ken's definition of the word stigma, we need to talk about this. So thank you very much, all of you so far who've been so open to join Doc Day, talk about this. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Felissa, and all the others. And we will do this again and again and again. Thank you very much.